This meeting is for 1 hour and 30 minutes. Zina S. will be sharing on getting the most out of the big book for 50 minutes. Zina, thank you for your service and your willingness to share your life here with us. We are delighted to have you here with us at God's meeting. So at this time, please help me give a warm welcome to Zina from Los Angeles, California, where her home group is Never Too Early Big Book Workshop. Welcome, Zina. The floor is yours.
Oh my goodness gracious alive. My name is Zina and I'm an alcoholic. And being the often undisciplined human that I am, the structure of this group is quite overwhelming, I must say. And so please forgive me as I pull myself back together and get in gear with what is expected. So my name is Zina and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is September 2nd, 1988. And yes, my home group is the Never Too Early Big Book Workshop. I don't think I've ever been this nervous in a Zoom meeting platform. And so thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me and trusting me with your audience. And so welcome to those who are new. Congratulations, Deirdre, on your birthday. And thank you so much for giving me the platform for this time. I stutter and I stammer because and my cat walks back and forth because she doesn't like that I work during the day. And so if you see her tail or whatever, I just let her be where she's also undisciplined, a lot like me. So I chose the topic, getting the most out of the big book, because we're accustomed and we're introduced to the 12 steps in every meeting that you encounter. But the book is bigger than just those chapters that cover the 12 steps. And so I want to just introduce to some and remind others of the rest of the book, because it's very, very powerful and very, very impactful. But just to give you an idea that I didn't come waltzing into the rooms of AA with everything all together, and to give you a little bit of history for me, I never felt whole or complete inside myself growing up, and it wasn't because of anything that necessarily happened to me. No matter what was given or offered, my response to it was that it was simply not enough. And being sober and working the steps and getting armed with facts about self along this journey, what I've discovered is that was the biggest part of my ism, that it's never enough. There was never enough alcohol. There was never enough love. There was never enough adoration. There's just simply never enough. It is not enoughness that I experienced that led to my constant search to feel the empty hole that I walked with on the inside. I'm gonna jump right in. And I want to talk about the 4 chapters after the 12th step. To the wives, to the family afterwards, to the employers, and a vision for you. Because after I go through the grueling experience of step 1 and coming to terms with the level of powerlessness and how that shows up in every area of my life, not just with alcohol, how the way that I responded to alcohol, was impacted by alcohol, felt about alcohol, is primarily the way I responded to life in general in every aspect. And when I was able to identify, understand, and concede to my innermost self the level of powerlessness that was the true fact of my life, I was able to see it in other areas of my life. And so, but it felt like a daunting, grueling. I felt like I lived a whole new lifetime just in getting through step one. And then, oh my God, there goes step two. And that happened repeatedly through every step, all the way to step four. And in step four, I look at step four as the mighty mountain pillar in recovery, that if I climb this mountain, I've got it made. As if I don't know that this is a 12-step program. Somehow, some way, in my twisted perspective, I think if I can conquer step four, then I've got it made. And what step four did for me, the first time especially, and repeatedly since, is unravel whatever I thought I knew about me. All the certainties I had about myself were unraveled in step four. But still I had that idea, that curious idea that if I conquer this, I can conquer the world. And I knew about step five, but step 6 and 7 are so they're so unintimidating, because it's just a couple of sentences that I'm caught off guard at the level that I'm struck with when I encounter those two steps. And so even though I've overcome my step 4 hurdle and I've climbed that mountain and I've reached the peak and pinnacle of what I think is the base of recovery for me, by the time I get to step 6 and 7, I'm so incredibly sick to my nauseous stomach of me. And it's quite jarring, almost as jarring as it was to see just my picture in this view of the Zoom. It's like, oh my God, how much me can I handle? This is too much. That's too much me. And that's what 6 and 7 did to me. It gave me so much me that I was nauseous. I could not wait to surrender the level of me that I could not stand anymore. In step 7, the level of me that I discovered in 6, I couldn't wait to surrender it in step 7, and then I come to 8 and 9, and I realize, just as sick as I am of me, I have stepped on the toes of my fellows all throughout my life. And I came to the rooms at the age of 28, and I thought I was grown at the age of 18, and I was living like an adult at the age of 16. So there was a whole bunch of me being me, running my life like me, like there's no one else. And so by the time I get to steps 8 and 9, I'm like, oh man, I have a lot of people. I have a lot of people I must go back and clean my side of the street. And so now I have a renewed sense of what I felt in 4, which is this is the actual pinnacle of recovery. And if I can just, conquer this, then I'll have it made. My base will be solidified. And I finish, all my amends, and then 10 and 11 tell me to do something every day. Whose discipline are they asking me to operate from in this everyday activity? I got to talk to God every day. I got to look at my wrongs every day, every single, oh my God. And so now it's like, okay, if I can conquer this, if I can get this in place, then I've truly reached the pinnacle of my recovery, and I have a solid base to stand on. And then they say, go tell it to somebody. And so I arrive at step 12. I journey to step 12 under the assumption that if I complete these tasks that are set before me, I in some way graduate from this place of newness that I thought I came in with. And now I'm what do you call, I'm a senior experienced member in this thing called living life with these tools of recovery under my belt that I can now, safely step off the curb in the world and walk without, consequence or harm. So to the wives, to the family afterwards, to the employers, and a vision for you gives us a fair cross-reference of what walking this thing out after having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps looks like. And so my personal sponsees don't get to finish the steps at 12. They must complete these 4 chapters because they all arrive to 12 thinking, got that done. You are so not done. You have just gotten familiar with the crap that you did. You came into this fellowship on the ruler point at the negative space. And at 12, you finally got up to 0. And now you can begin. But before you begin, get familiar with some of the people that you have harmed along the way. And you find that out into the wives, the family afterward, the employer, and in a vision for you. And so I'm often amazed at how many people do not embark on those 4 chapters. When I tell you it is rich information, that when I say golden nuggets of information in those 4 chapters, and believe it or not, y'all, I'm gonna get close because when I get excited, I talk loud, and y'all said my volume is good, so I don't want to scream at y'all, but even after a vision for you, the book is still not finished. And I'm often amazed at how many people balk at 1, 2, and 3, and then want to sit leisurely in 4, and then slightly avoid 6 and 7 as if they don't do them, they just go away, and pretend like 8 and 9 are not part of the 12, and then assume that 10 and 11 can all be done in silent meditation, and that's it, and that's all. The place where you find out the quality of the information that you've just digested once you've completed all 12 is to be able to walk this thing out. And the indicator on how well you're walking it out will come from the wives, the family afterward, the employer, before you even get to the vision for you. Yeah, somebody wrote in here, steps 10 and 11 are not extra credit. No, they are not. They are required inside of the 12. And so, but my proof that I have given it a quality try to digest this information is walking out what I've just been exposed to in my everyday life. Because when I first came to the rooms of recovery, I could come in, I barely knew any of you guys, first or last name. I knew where none of you lived, that we were not friends, but I loved you, and I could say it freely without hesitation and without resistance. You could reach for me and embrace me, and I would receive and accept your hugs. But let one of my 5, and I count them again, 5 kids just tap me on my shoulder and say, "Ma," and I go ballistic. That was my first indicator that I hadn't worked these steps as well as I thought. Because the steps were easy to work in the rooms with other people who also work the steps. The proof of how well I had digested this information, internalized it, conceded to my innermost self that I had accepted this way of living, came in when someone called me out my name and I did not respond in harm. I didn't pay them harm for harm. And that was not my reality when I finished 12, but had yet to embark on the 4 chapters after that. And so looking at To the Wives and the Family Afterwards are 2 chapters behind step 12 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that were written by the fellowship that came to be known, I believe, as the Al-Anons. It's the people that had to deal with us. But I don't take it as accident that it's in our book. And so, yeah, I can sit in my alcoholic seat all day long and talk about how that story doesn't pertain to me. It's not my story. It's the story of my mate. But why is it in my book? This book is so divinely orchestrated that I cannot pretend that parts of it don't apply to me. It may not be relevant in the reality that I'm walking it in the moment, but if I don't adopt all of it as an option that either I have experienced or may experience, I am certain to experience no matter what. Because To the Wives and the Family Afterwards are not Al-Anon chapters in my big book. They are alcoholic chapters in the alcoholic book for the alcoholic to get armed with facts about the alcoholic in the way that they caused harm in their family and with their spouses that they think didn't have any effect. And so I'm very resistant to go line by line. And in your introduction, I got that this is a meeting and not a home group, and I respect that. It's a meeting and not a home group, and this is not a workshop. This is not a sponsorship experience. And so I'm not going to take you line by line. I'm going to tell you it's my responsibility to inform you of where to go find the information. And then it is your responsibility to go find it and read it for yourself. And utilize the support system that is around you to get other perspectives besides your own, which is another reason why To the Wives and the Family Afterwards is in our book, so that we can look at our experiences and the effects of that from the perspective that is not our own. Because when I come into the rooms, I see everything through the eyes of an alcoholic. Everything has its context based on my perception and how I've been impacted. I never want to look at anything by the perspective of the people who are affected by my tirades, my tornado storms, the chaos and confusion that I create, all the rules and regulations that I bring, and the absolute resistance to follow any of the places that I show up to. I never want to look at the other perspectives of those things. And so To the Wives and the Family Afterwards help us see our lives through the lens of our spouse, our children, our parents, our in-laws, our aunts, uncles, cousins, our family, our immediate circle. And then To the Employer helps us look at what our bosses had to deal with while we was talking smack in the parking lot about how we ain't got to do whatever it is we signed on the contract and agreed to do when we begged for the job in the first place. It gets us to see how arrogantly after everything we just experienced in the 12, how our arrogance does not dissipate when we step out of the book study, the meeting, the fellowship event, where all the people, even if they've not worked the steps, they know what they are. And so they can tell that I'm working a step if they're watching me close enough, or at least that's my assumption. Because again, I'm looking at life from my own perspective only, and I never consider anyone else. And so to the employers helps me understand the place in the big book that told me I have a new employer, a new director. I work for someone else. For the first time in my life, I was able to go to my job, which at the time that I had gotten to that information, I was able to go to the job that I was working at that time, which I hated, and I stopped hating it. I found a way to have gratitude in that place of employment, even though I didn't enjoy the tasks that I was required to do. I was just to be able to just shift just a little to the left and look from a different purview. The fact that not too many years prior to that, I was unemployable. Not too many years prior to that, I couldn't be trusted to show up. And now I'm going to arrogantly show up on time, mad that you want to dock me 2 minutes because it take me 2 minutes to get from the parking lot to the clock that I got to clock in on. But I knew that before I left my house, and I still didn't give myself an extra 3 minutes. Like, my 5 minutes is more valuable than the 5 minutes you're paying me for. I want to take my walking time out of the money you're paying me for. The assumptions of the alcoholic are so ludicrous when we stand them up against real stories in these last 4 chapters. A Vision for You gives us a really it gives us a really raw look through a glass window into a mirror of how much damage we truly cause, not just inside but outside of ourselves, and how those in line of the eye of my storm, the storm that is me, that list grows ad infinitum. And if I'm just willing to look at my life from a perspective that is not just my perspective, am I just willing to ask myself, what if I were walking in their shoes? How would I feel? How would I feel if I treated them the way that they treated me? How would I feel if I expected from them what they have expected from me? If I just put myself in another person's shoes, if I just set my selfish desires aside, if I just ask, God, in whatever form I've chosen to identify, acknowledge, or be connected to him, if I just ask the higher power that I have chosen to guide and direct my life, and then trust that guidance and direction, how much different would my life be it right or wrong, when things happen and when they don't? Because the other curious suspicion that I have is that now that I'm not drinking and I've worked all the steps and I've had this conscious contact with the God of my understanding as a result of it, suddenly the world is going to do all the things that I want. Or at least what I say. Because even if I don't acknowledge it, I have an idea that I don't always want what I say I want. Because most times I will create a reality that I desire, and as soon as all the ducks are lined up in the proper row, suddenly this picture doesn't look like what I want anymore. And then I need everything to change again because I'm not even clear about me. And that's the truth that I come up with. But even after having done all of that, all the 12 steps and the 4 chapters, the personal stories in the back of the book, they're so relevant, I almost miss them. I started at the time that you guys could barely hear me because my volume was wonky. What I was saying to you guys is I'm so undisciplined and there's so much order and structure in this meeting that I almost didn't want to come. I was just like, I can't go. I can't go. They have it together and I won't fit. I don't belong. I don't belong. I'm not going. It's so structured. There's so much preparation and it's all in order. And every orderly instruction that I received, my inner conversation was like, who are these people and why do they demand so much? Because at my core, I'm really accustomed to chaos. When things are happening in an orderly fashion, I'm screwed. I jack myself up. I take myself through all these changes of the ideas I have about what I can't do, ain't gonna do, what you can't make me do. And the reality is I'm so honored that you asked me. So that's just how quick the twisted mind of the alcoholic gets it wrong. It's like, oh, thank you for asking me. Don't ask me to do nothing. Oh, thank you for inviting me. Don't be making me respond to the invitation. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, who are these people that want me to do stuff and prove stuff and be on time? Regular stuff. And what the personal stories in the back of the book do for us, I want to just prelude it with this. There is a formula to the personal stories in the back of the book, but with each edition of the big book that has been done, there was the original, there was another one done, I think some years later, I don't know how many years later. I have a 3rd edition that was done in the 70s. The 4th edition, I think, was done in the early 2000s. They're in the process of doing another edition, but with every edition, they update the personal stories in the back to reflect the cultural norm for that period of time. But there's a formula that every one of the stories follow, no matter what edition you're reading from. And that is the personal stories in the back. They start with who the person is and what their ideals were. And then it talks about the devastation of what it was like for them. And in a few sentences or pages, it doesn't take much for them. It tells them what happened, how they got to their bottom, and how they were encouraged to seek out a different solution than what they have been using with alcohol. And every story ends with what it is like today at the time of that writing. And so when I know that is the formula, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today, when I know that is the formula of every single story in the personal stories in the back of the book, of every edition of the big book from 1939 to now, I can find recovery in the back of the book no matter what year, what edition, or what story I'm looking at. And so if I just open my book and it falls on a story, and I'll just try it now and see what happened. I open the book, I'm in 3rd edition. I'm on page 365. I open the book randomly to a story called Rum, Radio, and Rebellion. I ain't read one sentence, and that title is hilarious to me. Why? Because it resonates with me. I understand what it is to be drunk and lost in the lyrics of some song, because it brings up some emotion and the rebelliousness that rises up in me when I'm in that state. And so if I just let my eyes drop anywhere, the first sentence that stands out is, a lucky break, at least some will call it lucky, was in store for me at my group that night. Attended his 4th or 5th meeting, was an old friend I had not seen for 20 or 20 years. So I know that he's either in the early parts of his recovery, in this story, or he's talking about the attempt to return from a relapse. But either way it goes, I can read this. I can choose to read this story from this point and look at his life as it is for the today at the time of the writing for him, because in order for me to translate what he's saying in a language that speaks to me and my life, I have to understand what he was doing, when he was doing it, and why he was doing it. And then I can look at what is similar to me. Because once I get to a connection point, then who is this guy? I'm going to go to the beginning of the story and find out the author of this particular story. It's just a man. It doesn't have his name, but I can relate to Rum Rebellion and radio. And so if I'm going to get the benefit of a program of recovery that is a design for living, for Zina in 2023, at 62 years old, with 5 adult children and their children who have dealt with life and loss and birth and death and grief and being wealthy and being not wealthy. If I'm going to relate me to whatever he was talking about somewhere before, I think this third edition was published in 1976. So it had to be a story that was in here before 1976. If I'm going to relate to that, I need to be able to understand what his formula is, see where he was in the steps. It's the same thing I do in every meeting I go to. And so when you are looking at how do I get the most out of the program that I have surrendered to willingly, and ask the people there to help me go through this thing called life, I want to get familiar with the books they use, the language they use, the places that they go, the things that they do, and connect where it aligns, and sometimes even when it doesn't. What my life is like today is I have been introduced as of 1988 to a power that I have been seeking since at least 1965, 67, 68 as a child, when my grandmother taught me about the God that she knew. And it was in direct conflict with the God my father described to me, because my grandmother was a Christian minister and my father was a Muslim minister. And so that's a direct clash. And so very early on, I was in a seeking space that I didn't have much resolution for amongst people that I loved and trusted. And so I went seeking very early, and I landed in a place in 88 where I thought I had found it. And then I started in the book, and I kept being reintroduced to information that confirmed that I hadn't found it yet. And finally, somewhere in recovery, and for the newcomers, please don't get discouraged. But I finally found it in maybe somewhere between the 10 and 15 year mark of recovery. I was able to say, you know what? I don't know. I believe it's this. I'm going to walk with that. If it works, Great. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to try this again, and we're going to walk with something else. And the goal for me was to grasp a hold of a belief system that stood between me and the next drink while I went on this great exploration. And I call that God. It is a God of my own understanding. It's not my grandmother's God. It's not my father's God. It's not the God that the church talks about. It's not the God that the people talk about in the rooms. It is a God that is personal to me. And that God, believe it or not, takes on many shapes and forms, and he speaks in many different languages. I choose to be able to connect with every human being because I believe that underneath that human being clothing, there's a spiritual nature of some kind, that if my spirit connects with that spirit, then we will find our commonalities and we will leave our differences to the side. And when I'm able to do that, the God that I say I believe in works every single time, even when his working results in a disappointment. The God I serve today gives me the courage to handle my disappointments. Because what I've learned after being around the rooms and going through this book cover to cover is that everything is not going to be peachy keen hunky dory. It's not always sunshine and rainbows. And so the true testament of the validity of the relationship I say I have with the God I say I serve shows itself when I don't get my way. How do I treat people when I'm disappointed? How do I act at the job I don't want to go to? Do I hold those people hostage because I don't want to be there instead of simply just quitting and going somewhere else? That would be the more gentle thing to do. If I truly hate it as much as I say, I'll resign and go somewhere else. But if I need to be there, why can't I operate from the understanding that probably they need to be there too? And if we can't get along for an 8-hour day, then what kind of program am I really working? If my kids can't tap me on the shoulder and go, Mom, what kind of program am I really working? If my spouse or my partner cannot come to me with a difficult conversation that I don't like or I don't agree with, and we can't lovingly communicate with one another how we're affected by this action, this statement, or that statement, then what kind of program am I working? And so once I am introduced to the steps as they are laid out, 1 through 12, these 4 chapters immediately after 12 give me more information to consider so that I recognize when I get to practice walking out what I say I believe. Because it's way back in the 3rd step that they ask you to make a decision. Choose you this day where you gonna stand. God is either everything or he is nothing. And even if you are an agnostic, I tell people who are agnostic, if you have an issue with the God that people keep trying to attach you to, then what you got? Let's work with that. What you got and what do you call it? And let's work with that. Because if what you got is the fellowship and that is the higher power that you are comfortable with, that you can lean on, that you can work with, that you are able to connect with and align with, then let's work with that for as long as it works. And identify, can you establish an active, healthy relationship with that particular higher power? Or does it only work when you can see it? Because if it only works when you can see it, there might be a problem with attaching all. It can't be my employer because I can't see it when I'm at work with the people I don't like. And so in these last 10 minutes, I can't believe my cat sat in my lap this whole time. And now she's all rested. She's like, you finished? Can we go? But in these last 10 minutes, I want to say that I've taken huge risk. I entered into the entrepreneurial world in 2020, and it's such a trip because I went to my boss. I had a long conversation. I was just like, I believe I can do this, and I really want to try. And I just want to make sure that I leave this environment with integrity. I don't want to leave by surprise, and I don't want to leave on bad blood. I don't want it to be an issue, and I don't want to make you look bad that I'm resigning. And he just like, you guys taught me how to go have that conversation. Because before I got to you guys, I went to one of the last jobs that I worked before I got to the rooms, and I walked in that day in tennis shoes instead of my business suit, and I packed up my little desk, and I told the head secretary, I was like, call a temp agency because I quit. That was my notice. And I walked back out laughing because I feel like I showed her. That's such a terrible way to burn a bridge. But anyway, and so I made this decision to take this entrepreneurial journey, and my last day was March 9th of 2020. And on March 13th, the whole world shut down. And I was like, wait, I just quit my job. Wait a minute. I could have worked from home. I couldn't believe I made that decision 5 days before I could have been working from home anyway. But you guys taught me to take whatever situation. The steps taught me to make a decision. And my support system taught me that if my decision doesn't have a good outcome, I can always choose again. I'm not a slave to the decision that I made. I get to choose again. That's the beauty of choice. But when I don't choose anything, I am in bondage to indecision for months and years. When if I had just chosen, it don't take long to be like, that's not good. I need to choose something else. And what I was able to do, because I had already chosen, it was final, I was already gone, is build a business online immediately and go from there. And we're in 2023 and my business is still, I can't say thriving, but I'm still at it. And I still have joy. And in the midst of that, I buried my mom. In the midst of that, I buried my brother, the only sibling on my mother's side that I had. In the midst of that, I became the matriarch in my family. In the midst of that, I've had to encounter not just death and darkness, but depression and uncertainty, fear. The steps say we will lose the fear of economic insecurity. It never said we will never be economically insecure. It says that we will lose that fear. And understanding how to speak the language that is spoken and stop giving it definitions that it never promised me. I can hear what is actually said, and I can trust what is actually happening. I believe that wherever I am in the present moment, that is the place where the God that I serve will meet me. He will meet me in my now every time, but he's a gentleman for me, my personal belief. He's a gentleman. He will only come if I invite him. And so I invite him into every area of my life. I don't try to fix my life and then invite him to the perfect party. I invite God to the imperfection of the grandiose dreams that I have. And then I ask him to guide my feet on the path to get to the place. Because as long as the dreams of my heart are anchored in glorifying him, I believe he will support and give me the things that I need to attain every single one of them. As long as it is who I am and what I am doing everywhere that I go. Whether I'm suiting up for you or whether I'm suiting up for me. And in these last few minutes, I just want to share I had to learn that I don't lose. I am not the loser that I thought I was. I have never lost, and I didn't know that. I had to learn that I am not a loser and I have never lost. I either win or I learn. Those are the two conditions that I stand in. I either win or I learn. And every place that I go, I'm either coming to that place to teach or to learn. And so before I strike off a place as a place I don't want to be, before I just walk out of an uncomfortable situation because it's uncomfortable, I ask, am I here to learn or am I here to teach? Or did I wind up here by happenstance and simply need to choose again as I back my way out and go the direction I was truly meant to go? And so as a result of having this belief system, I am in a constant state of joy, even when my circumstances are sad. It was not joy. I was not happy to bury my mom, and I was not happy to bury my brother, but I was able to find the joy in the life that I live with both of them. I was able to enjoy the experience of remembering that my very last conversation with both of them was loving and gentle. There were smiles. There was no angst and no anger. No one was mad. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to do in either of those situations. And if those two situations had to be completed, what a glorious, gentle, sovereign God I have, that he allowed me to end those experiences, to let my final engagements with both of those relationships to be pleasant and loving, nothing that I regret. And so I get to joyfully say thank you for seeing what I couldn't see and making sure that I didn't harm what you knew that was coming up the pike that I didn't even see coming. And so what I invite you to do for anyone under the sound of my voice, new or old, is to embark on the journey of getting to know you. You're gonna come across some ugly truths, and it's okay. Saying them out loud is not going to make them any more true or any less true. Keeping them to yourself will not eliminate the fact that they are still true. And so face your secret with boldness. Get somebody that you can trust. And if you get somebody and you trust them and they show themselves unworthy of the trust you've already given them, don't hold it against them. Thank God that you found out and you can choose again and choose somebody else. Every place that you land in this thing called life, in this journey called recovery, is meant and divinely orchestrated. And you will not cease to show up to these spaces in this existence until your task here on earth is complete. And on that day, you will wake up and it won't be here on earth and you'll be done. But for every day that your eyes open here on this earth, you have a responsibility to either learn or teach. Trust and believe. Face yourself. Laugh a lot. Get ready because it's a ride. Enjoy the journey. Be gentle. Thank you so much for letting me share.